of the Old Testament. It was before any of the sacrifices that had to be created. It was his faith and his faith alone that accredited to him as righteous.
That's right.
And that's just the whole center of our faith right there.
Right. Now, there was a question that Abram had that I'm sure any of us would have. How can I know God? How can I know that I'll possess it? Well, God told him exactly what to sacrifice here. He said, go get a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. So he presented all of them to him and killed them. Then he cut each animal down the middle and laid the halves side by side. He did not, however, cut the birds in half.
Now this phrase, go get all these animals for me,
Right.
and Abram cutting them in half, it just seems weird and backwards to us. It doesn't really make much sense to us. And you have to do a little bit of research to find out what exactly this means. Back around this time, there was an ancient practice that you would use to create contracts. Kings of nations who conquered other nations would have their kings make contracts with them that you do these things as my servant, or what happens to these animals happens to you.
Right.
It's kind of deal. And that's that type of binding oath that people would have on each other. It's a really serious, actually, type of contract here. And Abram understood that. It's a binding oath placed on each party member. If they fail on that side of the promise, that's going to happen to you. If God fails, it happens to him. If Abram fails, it happens to him. And that's the sense that Abram is having in his mind right now.
Right.
This type of binding oath. Oh, this is getting serious here.
Getting very serious. So as the sun was going down, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a terrifying darkness came down over him. And I want to talk about that terrifying darkness. Sometimes when God has called us to do a thing, we say yes in our zeal and our love for God. We'll say yes. Because if God came down to me in an audible voice and said, hey, do this, I'm going to do it. But then, after the yes, sometimes comes this terrifying darkness. You know?
Yeah.
Once we say, yes, we'll do this. Like, just for example, when you talked to me about this, and I said, yeah, we can do that. Like, for weeks, I was like, no, we can't.
We can't do this. This podcast is too much. I was feeling that. I was feeling that
There
too.
have been times when it's been like,
I'm still feeling that.
So our terrifying darkness can be different things. But the Lord said it was in the terrifying darkness, my friends, that the Lord said to him, you can be sure that your descendants will be strangers in a foreign land, where they will live as strangers. They will live as... Let me start over.
Redo.
Yeah, bifocals aren't cooperating. You can be sure that your descendants will be strangers in a foreign land, where they will be oppressed as slaves for 400 years. But I will punish the nation that enslaves them, and in the end they will come away with great wealth. And then in parentheses it says, as for you, you will die in peace and be buried at a ripe old age. Now that was all verses 13 through 15 in chapter 15, if you want to take a look at that. And then it says, he goes on to tell him, after 4 generations, your descendants will return here, for the sins of the Amorites do not yet warrant their destruction. Now after the sun went down and the darkness fell, Abram saw a smoking pot and a flaming torch pass between the halves of the carcass.
Now this is the most interesting part of all, because again, to you and me that means nothing. But having knowledge that this is a binding contract, where each party has to go through the 2 halves, it's showing Abram never went through the 2 halves.
Right.
God was the only one who went through those 2 halves.
So he said, no matter what.
No matter what. If I mess up, let it be on me. If you mess up, let it be on me. Whatever happens to these animals happens on me.
Right.
I will take responsibility. That's speaks volumes.
Right. He
Here.
sure does. It sure does.
I mean, it's not like he's not saying you have. He's still saying you have to do these things.
Right.
But he's not laying any type of burden on him to do it.
Exactly.
It's a sense of love here, because love does not push people into ultimatums.
There you go. There you go. That's good stuff, Chris. That's good stuff. And then after he sees this torch pass through, he lists off all these borders and all these people groups. And that's where the chapter 15 ends. And that's where we hear, that's the end of this covenant promise that we have been reading about. And that's what makes it so. So, do you have anything else to add today?
Just to wrap it all up, yeah, and it was a lot of information we threw at you.
But it was exciting information.
It was exciting information. A war happened. A promise was created, and a covenant was created with Abram, sealing the idea that he has to do things, but there's no burden on him to fulfill them. A sense that if he truly loves God, he will fulfill them.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that, too, that there's no burden on him to fulfill them, because in our faith and in our salvation, the burden all falls on God. If you think about it, the burden of salvation falls on God. It is us to accept it. All we have to do is accept it, the salvation that he provides. The burden of all of it is on him. So it's really set forth that we're seeing the beginning of another theme with this covenant promise, that the burden, God will take the burden. He wants us to know him. Can you give me that? We got behind the scenes people here. And Adrian Cherry is watching us today. Hey, girl. So we want to give a shout out every once in a while when we can get the message on this side of the camera who's checking us out. Also, you guys can help us out if you enjoy this at all, or if you think that somebody could be benefited by some part of this message. Share this thing, and because you may not know who sees it, they can only see it because you share it. And that's the thing that I can't emphasize enough, is there may be somebody that needs to hear one particular sentence of one particular episode, and they may not get it if you don't share it. So give it a share, give it a like, let us know if there's anything that we can change or do that might make us better, because we're all about learning about that. And in the meantime, we love you. God loves you. Have a very blessed evening.